when sophisticated hackers launched a coordinated cyber attack on DataFlow Solutions at 2:30 p.m., expecting to infiltrate a small tech company with basic security. They had no idea that the slow-moving 45-year-old IT support guy they'd bypassed in their reconnaissance was Master Sergeant Marcus Williams, a retired Air Force cyber operations specialist with 20 years of experience defending Pentagon systems against nation-state attackers. In just 45 minutes, the outdated IT guy that employees had been mocking for years would demonstrate why you never challenge someone who's fought cyber wars against China and Russia. Welcome to the Untold Stories. Before we dive deep into this, the explosive tale of hidden cyber warriors and digital battlefields, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from today? And if you believe stories of silent digital guardians deserve to be heard. Hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to witness will change how you see every IT worker, every tech support person, every person you assume doesn't understand modern technology. DataFlow Solutions occupied 3 floors of a glass office building in downtown Nashville. Its sleek interior design and open workspace layout projecting the image of a forward-thinking technology company that helped businesses optimize their data management and digital work. With 200 employees and annual revenue approaching $50 million. DataFlow had carved out a profitable niche in the competitive world of business software solutions. The company's success depended entirely on its ability to maintain client trust in an era when data breaches and cyber attacks dominated headlines daily. Their marketing materials emphasized security, reliability, and cutting-edge protection that gave clients confidence their sensitive information would remain safe in DataFlow's cloud-based systems. Marcus Williams had been responsible for maintaining that security for 6 years as the company's senior IT support specialist, though most employees saw him as anything but cutting it. At 4:05, Marcus moved through the office with the deliberate pace of someone who'd learned that rushing led to mistakes, spoke in technical terminology that younger staff found outdated, and approached problems with systematic thoroughness. That seemed painfully slow in a culture that valued speed and innovation. The younger IT staff, fresh from computer science programs and coding boot camps, privately referred to Marcus as old school, not entirely as a compliment. His methods seemed antiquated compared to their agile development practices and cloud-native solutions, where they embraced automated tools and AI-assisted diagnostics. Marcus insisted on manual verification and systematic analysis that took time, but he claimed, provided more reliable results. Marcus knows his stuff, was the diplomatic assessment most colleagues offered when asked about his work. He's just not really up to speed on modern threats and solutions. What they were observing wasn't technological obsolescence but the manifestation of training that had been forged in digital battlefields where speed without precision could compromise national security. Marcus's methodical approach to network analysis, his insistence on redundant verification procedures, and his habit of documenting every system change reflected lessons learned during 20 years of defending critical military infrastructure against the world's most sophisticated cyber adversaries. His journey to DataFlow Solutions had begun in 1998 when an 18-year-old Marcus Williams had enlisted in the United States Air Force. With dreams of working with cutting-edge technology and serving his country in the emerging field of information warfare, what he'd found was a calling that would define the next 2 decades of his life and forge him into one of the military's most capable cyber operations specialists. The progression from basic computer technician to cyber warfare specialist had required Marcus to master not just technical skills but strategic thinking, threat analysis, and the complex art of digital combat, where battles were fought in microseconds across networks that spanned the globe. His early assignments had involved maintaining and securing Air Force communication systems, but his aptitude for understanding both technical systems and adversarial thinking had quickly brought him to the attention of senior leaders in the newly emerging field of cyber operations. By the early 2000s, Staff Sergeant Williams was working in classified facilities where the Air Force was developing capabilities to defend against and conduct cyber attacks that were becoming a critical component of modern warfare. His responsibilities had evolved from system maintenance to active defense, hunting for intrusions, and developing countermeasures against adversaries who were becoming increasingly sophisticated in their methods. The September 11th attacks had transformed Marcus's career from periodic cybersecurity duties to continuous operations in a global digital war that most civilians never realized was being fought. His unit had been tasked with defending critical military networks against attacks from state-sponsored hacking groups, terrorist organizations, and criminal enterprises that sought to steal classified information, disrupt military operations, or gain strategic advantages through cyber espionage. The years that followed had blurred together in a succession of deployments to classified facilities where Technical Sergeant Williams and his team conducted defensive cyber operations that protected everything from drone operations to nuclear weapons systems. His expertise had expanded from network defense to threat analysis, malware reverse engineering, and the development of cyber weapons that could neutralize enemy capabilities without conventional military force. By the time he'd reached the rank of Master Sergeant, Marcus Williams was responsible for training the next generation of Air Force cyber operators while continuing to participate in operations that remained classified at the highest levels. His work had taken him to facilities where the military's most sensitive cyber capabilities were developed and deployed against adversaries who included some of the world's most technologically advanced nations. The transition from military cyber operations to civilian IT support had been jarring in ways that Marcus hadn't anticipated. After 20 years of work where system failures could compromise national security and cyber attacks could influence international conflicts, the stakes of corporate IT seemed almost trivially low, but the principles were transferable. The same attention to detail that had protected military networks could safeguard business data, and the threat analysis skills that had countered nation-state attacks could identify and neutralize criminal hackets. Marcus had deliberately chosen a position that would keep him connected to cybersecurity while allowing him to build a peaceful civilian life. DataFlow Solutions had offered the opportunity to use his technical skills in a environment where success was measured in system uptime and client satisfaction rather than national security implications and classified mission outcomes. For 6 years, Marcus had found satisfaction in work that utilized his expertise while avoiding the psychological pressure that had accumulated during 2 decades of defending against adversaries who viewed cyber attacks as acts of war. He maintained DataFlow's network infrastructure with the same systematic approach he'd once used to protect Pentagon systems, implemented security protocols that exceeded industry standards, and responded to technical problems with thoroughness that clients appreciated even if colleagues found it excessive. His typical day began at 7 a.m. with a comprehensive review of system logs, network traffic analysis, and security monitoring that most of his colleagues considered unnecessarily detailed. Marcus would examine every anomaly, investigate unusual patterns, and document findings with precision that reflected his military training in environments where overlooking small details could have catastrophic consequences. The morning security briefing he conducted for himself covered threat intelligence updates, vulnerability assessments, and analysis of attack patterns that might indicate developing threats to DataFlow's systems. It was information that his civilian colleagues neither sought nor appreciated, but Marcus considered it essential preparation for a job that required constant vigilance against adversaries who never stopped evolving their techniques. His interactions with DataFlow employees reflected the cultural gap between military precision and civilian expectations. When employees submitted IT tickets for problems that seemed simple, Marcus would ask detailed questions about symptoms, usage patterns, and recent changes that struck them as unnecessarily complex for basic technical support. "I just need my email to work," was a common complaint from users who grew impatient with Marcus's systematic diagnostic approach. "Why does he need to know what websites I visited last week?" What they didn't understand was that Marcus's questions were designed to identify not just immediate problems but potential security implications that casual users wouldn't recognize. His experience with advanced persistent threats had taught him that seemingly minor technical issues could be indicators of sophisticated attacks designed to remain undetected while gathering intelligence or preparing for larger operations. The younger IT staff who worked under Marcus's supervision appreciated his knowledge, but grew frustrated with his insistence on procedures that seemed outdated in an era of automated tools and cloud-based solutions. They wanted to implement cutting-edge security products that promised artificial intelligence-driven threat detection and automated response capabilities. Marcus wasn't opposed to modern tools, but his military experience had taught him that automation was only as good as the humans who configured and monitored it. He'd seen too many supposedly foolproof systems compromised by adversaries who understood their limitations better than the people who deployed them. "Technology is just a tool," Marcus would tell his team during their weekly security meetings. "The real security comes from understanding your adversaries and staying ahead of their thinking." It was wisdom earned through years of digital combat against opponents who included some of the world's most capable hacking organizations, but it sounded like outdated philosophy to a generation that had grown up believing that newer technology automatically meant better security. The disconnect between Marcus's approach and contemporary cybersecurity culture became apparent during DataFlow's annual security assessment, when outside consultants recommended implementing a comprehensive security suite that promised to revolutionize the company's cyber defense capabilities. "This will give you real-time threat detection and automated response that's far more advanced than your current manual processes," the lead consultant had explained to DataFlow's executive team. "You'll be able to identify and neutralize threats faster than any human analyst could manage. Marcus had reviewed the proposed system's technical specifications and found capabilities that were impressive but not comprehensive. The artificial intelligence algorithms were sophisticated, but they were trained on attack patterns that represented known threats, rather than the novel techniques that advanced adversaries developed specifically to evade automated detection. It's a good system, Marcus had told the executives, but it shouldn't be our only line of defense. Automated tools are excellent for identifying known threats, but they struggle with novel attacks designed by adversaries who understand their limitations. His recommendation to maintain manual analysis alongside automated tools had been interpreted as resistance to innovation rather than strategic caution based on extensive experience with adversaries who specialized in defeating exactly the kind of systems being proposed. Marcus is stuck in the past became a common observation among younger staff who saw his caution as evidence that he couldn't adapt to modern cybersecurity challenges. He doesn't understand that AI and machine learning have changed everything. The irony was that Marcus understood artificial intelligence and machine learning better than most of his critics. Having worked with military systems that were years ahead of civilian technology, his caution wasn't based on ignorance but on knowledge of how sophisticated adversaries could exploit the assumptions and limitations that made automated systems vulnerable to attacks that their designers hadn't anticipated. The cultural tension reached a breaking point during a staff meeting when Jennifer Chen, DataFlow's newly hired cybersecurity analyst, presented a proposal to replace Marcus's manual monitoring procedures with a fully automated threat detection system that would eliminate what she called human bottlenecks in the company's security. Response: manual analysis is too slow for modern threats, Jennifer had argued. By the time a human analyst identifies an attack, the damage is already done. We need systems that can respond in milliseconds, not minutes. Marcus had listened to the presentation with the patience he'd learned during military briefings, where junior officers often proposed solutions that sounded innovative but ignored practical realities. When asked for his assessment, he'd provided feedback that was technically accurate but diplomatically challenging. Automated systems are excellent for responding to attacks they're designed to recognize, Marcus had said carefully, but our most dangerous adversaries are the ones who develop novel techniques, specifically to evade automated detection. If we rely entirely on AI, we're vulnerable to any opponent who understands our systems better than we do. The response from younger staff had been polite but dismissive. Marcus's concerns were noted and filed away as evidence of an older generation's inability to embrace technological progress. The executive team had approved Jennifer's proposal, with implementation scheduled to begin within 6 months. Marcus had accepted the decision with the professional grace he'd learned during 20 years of military service, but he'd also quietly begun implementing additional monitoring procedures that would provide backup coverage in case the automated systems proved inadequate against sophisticated threats. His precautions were invisible to colleagues who saw them as unnecessary redundancy, but Marcus had learned during his military career that backup systems often meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The extra work was worth the peace of mind that came from knowing DataFlow's defenses had depth and redundancy that adversaries couldn't easily overcome. The validation of Marcus's approach came at 2:30 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon in March, when DataFlow Solutions became the target of a coordinated cyber attack that would test every assumption about modern network security and automated threat detection. The attack began with reconnaissance that had been conducted over several weeks by adversaries who understood both the company's technical infrastructure and its personnel dynamics. The attackers had identified DataFlow as a valuable target, not just for its own data, but as a pathway to the sensitive information of its business clients, many of whom were government contractors and financial services companies. The initial intrusion vector was a spear phishing email sent to Jennifer Chen, the cybersecurity analyst who had championed automated threat detection. The message appeared to come from a legitimate security vendor and contained an attachment that promised details about newly discovered vulnerabilities in the automated systems DataFlow was planning to implement. Jennifer's decision to open the attachment was understandable given her role and interests, but it demonstrated exactly the kind of social engineering that Marcus had warned about during security training sessions. The malware embedded in the document was sophisticated enough to evade the automated detection systems that Jennifer trusted, establishing a foothold in DataFlow's network that the attackers could use to launch more comprehensive operations. Breach began with reconnaissance as the attackers mapped DataFlow's network topology, identified critical systems, and began the systematic process of elevating their privileges and expanding their access. Their techniques were state-of-the-art, utilizing zero-day exploits and custom malware that had been designed specifically to evade the kind of automated defenses that most companies relied upon. Marcus was conducting his routine afternoon security review when he noticed anomalies that the automated systems had classified as normal network activity. The patterns were subtle, slight increases in data transfer rates, unusual communication patterns between internal systems, and log entries that individually seemed innocuous but collectively suggested coordinated malicious activity. His manual analysis revealed what the automated systems had missed. DataFlow was under attack by adversaries who possessed sophisticated capabilities and detailed knowledge of modern cyber defense systems. The attackers were using techniques that Marcus recognized from his military experience with advanced persistent threats, conducted by nation-state hacking groups. Marcus's response was immediate and systematic. Rather than relying on automated countermeasures that the attackers had obviously planned for, he began implementing manual defensive procedures that drew on 20 years of experience with digital warfare against the world's most capable adversaries. His first priority was confirming the scope and nature of the intrusion without alerting the attackers to his awareness of their presence. Using monitoring tools that he'd configured independently of DataFlow's primary security systems, Marcus began tracking the attackers' movements and documenting their techniques with the precision he'd once used to analyze threats against Pentagon networks. The intelligence picture that emerged was sobering. The attackers had gained access to multiple systems, extracted significant amounts of data, and were preparing to deploy additional malware that would give them persistent access to DataFlow's most sensitive information. Their level of sophistication suggested backing by a well-resourced organization with access to advanced cyber weapons and detailed intelligence about DataFlow's defenses. Most concerning, the attackers had specifically targeted and neutralized many of the automated security systems that Jennifer and the executive team had trusted to protect the company. They'd used techniques that exploited the exact vulnerabilities that Marcus had warned about during security planning meetings. Marcus faced a decision that would define his civilian career and potentially determine DataFlow's survival as a company. He could follow standard corporate protocols and escalate the incident through management channels that would involve extended discussions, outside consultants, and response procedures that might take hours or days to implement. Or he could draw on his military experience and implement a defensive cyber operation that would neutralize the attackers immediately, but would also reveal capabilities and knowledge that he'd kept hidden throughout his civilian career. Marcus chose to defend his company and its clients using every technique he'd learned during 20 years of cyber warfare against adversaries who'd prepared him for exactly this kind of situation. The counterattack began with Marcus isolating the compromised systems to prevent further data exfiltration while maintaining the appearance of normal operations to avoid alerting the attackers to his intervention. Using custom tools that he'd developed during his military service, he began systematically identifying and neutralizing the malware that the attackers had deployed throughout DataFlow's network. His approach combined technical expertise with psychological warfare techniques that he'd learned during operations against nation-state adversaries. Rather than simply removing the attackers' tools, Marcus began feeding them false information designed to waste their time and resources while he gathered intelligence about their methods, objectives, and potential connections to other ongoing operations. The digital battle that followed would have been invisible to most DataFlow employees, but it represented a clash between some of the most advanced cyber capabilities available to criminal organizations and defensive techniques that had been developed to protect the most sensitive military systems in the world. Marcus systematically dismantled the attackers' infrastructure, neutralized their malware, and implemented countermeasures that not only protected DataFlow but provided intelligence that could help identify and prevent future attacks. His response demonstrated the kind of technical expertise and tactical thinking that only came from years of experience in digital combat environments, where mistakes could compromise national security. The operation concluded with the attackers' complete ejection from DataFlow's network and the recovery of all stolen data before it could be transmitted to external servers. Marcus had not only defended his company but had done so in a way that provided law enforcement with actionable intelligence about the criminal organization responsible for the attack. When Jennifer Chen arrived at her workstation the following morning, she found a detailed report documenting the attack, the response, and recommendations for preventing similar incidents in the future. The technical analysis was more comprehensive than anything she'd seen from commercial security vendors, and the defensive techniques described in the report reflected capabilities that shouldn't have been available to a corporate IT support specialist. Marcus, she said, approaching his desk with a mixture of confusion and respect. Did you write this report? Marcus looked up from his monitoring station, where he was conducting the same systematic security review that he'd performed every morning for 6 years. Yes, you should know what happened yesterday. Jennifer studied the report more carefully, noting technical details that suggested knowledge of advanced cyber warfare techniques that weren't typically taught in civilian security programs. How did you know how to do this? Marcus paused, weighing how much of his background to reveal. Air Force, he said simply. Cyber operations. retired Master Sergeant. The words hung in the air between them as Jennifer began to understand that the outdated IT guy she'd been dismissing was actually someone with expertise that far exceeded her own, despite her advanced degrees and industry certifications. "You were military cyber?" she asked, her voice carrying new respect. 20 years, Marcus confirmed. Pentagon duty, mostly threat analysis and network defense against nation-state adversaries. Jennifer looked around the office, realizing that DataFlow's employees had been working under the protection of someone whose background and capabilities they'd never imagined. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" Marcus returned to his monitoring station, his expression thoughtful. "Wasn't relevant to the job." Until yesterday, word of the incident spread quickly through DataFlow's management as executives realized that their company had been protected from a sophisticated cyber attack by an employee whose qualifications they'd dramatically underestimated. The automated security systems they'd trusted had failed completely, while the manual procedures they'd planned to eliminate had been the only thing standing between DataFlow and a potentially catastrophic data breach. The company's CEO, David Rodriguez, called an emergency meeting to understand what had happened and why their security systems had proven so inadequate against professional attackers. According to this report, Rodriguez said, reviewing Marcus's documentation, "Our automated defenses were completely bypassed, and we were saved by manual intervention using techniques that aren't available through commercial security products." Marcus had been reluctant to attend the meeting, preferring to maintain his low profile rather than becoming the center of executive attention. But the scope of the attack and its potential implications for DataFlow's clients had made his expertise too valuable to ignore. The attackers used techniques specifically designed to evade automated detection, Marcus explained. "They'd studied our systems and developed custom malware that could operate undetected by AI-based security tools. Manual analysis was necessary to identify patterns that machines weren't programmed to recognize." Rodriguez studied Marcus with new interest. "What's your background that prepared you for this kind of threat?" "Air Force cyber operations," Marcus replied. "I spent 20 years defending military networks against nation-state attackers who used similar techniques. The methods transferred to civilian threats." The revelation transformed Marcus's role at DataFlow permanently. Management, recognizing that they'd been dramatically undervaluing their senior IT specialist's capabilities, offered him a promotion to Chief Information Security Officer with a salary that reflected his true qualifications and responsibilities. More importantly, the incident had demonstrated the limitations of relying entirely on automated security tools against sophisticated adversaries. DataFlow began implementing a hybrid approach that combined the speed of automated detection with the analytical capabilities that only experienced human analysts could provide. "We learned something important," Rodriguez told the executive team during a follow-up meeting. "Advanced automation is valuable, but it's not sufficient against attackers who understand its limitations. We need both technological tools and human expertise to defend against modern threats." Jennifer Chen, who had initially advocated for fully automated security, became one of Marcus's strongest supporters as she began to understand the strategic thinking that guided effective cyber defense. "I thought newer technology was better," she admitted during a training session where Marcus was sharing lessons learned from the attack. "I didn't understand that sophisticated attackers specifically target the assumptions that automated systems are built on." Marcus appreciated her willingness to learn, recognizing in her the same enthusiasm for cybersecurity that had driven his own career decades earlier. "Automation is a tool," he explained. "A very good tool, but it's only as effective as the strategy behind it. The key is understanding your adversaries well enough to stay ahead of their thinking." The incident also attracted attention from the broader cybersecurity community, as word spread about DataFlow's successful defense against what investigators eventually determined was a nation-state-sponsored attack targeting multiple American companies simultaneously. Marcus was invited to speak at industry conferences about integrating military cyber defense techniques with commercial security practices. "The principles are the same whether you're defending Pentagon networks or business systems," Marcus told a conference of security professionals. "Know your adversaries, understand their capabilities, and maintain defensive depth that can adapt." Two novel attack techniques. 6 months after the attack, DataFlow Solutions had become a case study in effective cyber defense that balanced technological innovation with human expertise. Other companies began consulting with Marcus about security assessments and threat analysis, recognizing that his military experience provided insights that weren't available through conventional commercial channels. The transformation extended beyond professional recognition. Employees who had once seen Marcus as an obstacle to modernization now sought his guidance on everything from personal cyber security to career development in the rapidly evolving field of information security. "The thing about Marcus," Jennifer told new employees during security orientation, "is that he understands not just the technology but the adversaries who use technology as a weapon." That perspective changes everything about how you approach defense. Marcus's story became a template for veteran transition programs, highlighting how military cyber operations experience could translate into civilian careers that served both individual veterans and the companies that employed them. His example encouraged other military cyber professionals to seek positions where their unique background could make meaningful contributions to private sector security. The broader implications extended beyond individual success stories. Marcus's effective defense of DataFlow had demonstrated that the cyber warfare skills developed by military personnel were directly applicable to protecting civilian infrastructure. Against the same adversaries who threaten national security, there's no real distinction between military and civilian cyber threats anymore. Marcus explained to a group of transitioning veterans. The same groups that attack government systems also target private companies. The defensive techniques that protect military networks can protect business data. His approach to training new security personnel reflected lessons learned from both military service and civilian experience. Rather than emphasizing either traditional methods or cutting-edge technology, Marcus focused on developing the analytical thinking and threat awareness that enabled effective security work regardless of the specific tools available. Security is fundamentally about understanding adversaries and staying ahead of their capabilities. He told his team, technology changes constantly, but the principles of threat analysis and defensive thinking remain consistent. The night shift routine that Marcus had maintained for 6 years continued, but now his colleagues understood that his systematic monitoring and manual analysis represented expertise at the highest levels rather than resistance to innovation. His methodical approach to network security, his insistence on redundant verification, and his careful documentation had revealed themselves to be manifestations of professional excellence rather than technological obsolescence. We thought he was behind the times, one of the younger IT staff reflected months later. Turns out he was so far ahead that we couldn't recognize what we were seeing. Master Sergeant Marcus Williams, United States Air Force Cyber Operations, retired DataFlow Solutions Chief Information Security Officer, digital warrior, quiet professional, a man who had learned that the most important battles are often fought in silence, and that the most effective defense often comes from understanding adversaries better than they understand themselves. His story became a reminder that expertise comes in many forms, that experience has value that isn't always immediately apparent, and that the person you dismiss as outdated might possess exactly the knowledge and skills needed when everything depends on making the right decisions under pressure. As Marcus often told the cybersecurity professionals he eventually mentored, real security isn't about having the newest tools or the fastest response times. It's about understanding threats well enough to defeat them before they become critical. It was wisdom earned through 20 years of digital warfare and 6 years of civilian service, combined into a philosophy that honored both without diminishing either. The legacy of that March afternoon extended far beyond DataFlow Solutions. Marcus's successful defense became a template for public-private cooperation in cybersecurity, demonstrating how military expertise could be leveraged to protect civilian infrastructure against the same adversaries who threaten national security. Years later, when cybersecurity professionals discussed the evolution of threat detection and response, they often referenced the DataFlow incident as a turning point in understanding the relationship between automated tools and human analysis in defending against sophisticated adversaries. Never underestimate the quiet IT guy. It became common advice among security professionals who understood that capability often came quietly, and that the most effective defenders were sometimes those who seemed the least threatening to both colleagues and adversaries. The mission had evolved from protecting military networks to safeguarding business data, but the warriors' commitment to defending against digital threats remained constant.